Americans in the particular benefit of the situation had spent the rest of the month bearing siege down of the Trelleborg of the port. Unfortunately for the German garrison, had sabotaged the port and filled the harbors with mines, reconsiderable and unusable until late August, meaning the Allies don't have the functionality port of the reinforcement supplies of the Canada East finally captured the copycat airfield on July. However, the British were unable to capture the success on the most of June of the defensive stayed calm and usual progress seemed slow. On the eastern front of Normandy, the Western Americans began to take work on the Solo Heights. The day after the Desert Fox unluckily bridged over, they and the tanks were brutally destroyed, and the Americans prevailed success and staged the final breakout of Normandy. The Cobra of the July of August 25th, the danger close German positions of Schellburg, although highly controversial results, spoke for themselves of the left flank of the Germans withdrawing and the constitutional of the Allies forces advancing of the fields of the beautiful crops of German minefields waiting for the Allies to tread through. The invasion warfare of Normandy was covered by thick hedges, mostly divided into sections of farmlands, often 5 meters of 16 feet tall, perfect cover for German infantry. The fires turned into fields of miniature fortress, of the clean one by one at great cost by the attackers. Despite the nightmarish, the French countryside of the Americans has pushed south. Of the June or July, the Allied forces have been moved by Bering, by the Germans still defending the dagger, and they would not retreat until the infamous plot that was attempted the several top German rank officers to assassinate Hitler and have peace with the Allies. The involvement of Erwin Rommel collapsed on June 20th, the result of him forcing taking his own life. Mistrusting the remaining generals, Hitler took the situation into Normandy himself, demanding immediate counterattacks. By the time the American spearhead of the Third Army has been led, and the Germans that were sent to infiltrate them have ran out. The August of the German infantry and the Sherman tanks have heavily busted assault vehicles, considering 2 SS Panzer Division of 3 of these intended of the capture through the U.S. Behind forces, splitting into leads, and the element of the Third Reich achieved an old-fashioned encirclement. They have demolished and successfully hidden their forces. The might that actually pulled off these decent plans in 1944 when the Panzers attacked on August 7th. It was a devastating ambush that the Allied tank units had nowhere to run, and the German Panzer Force, Tigers, and Panzers have been broken through. They have been pushed back to Normandy, but Montgomery's force of Normandy began a new offensive to calm the western front. Of short days of tables have turned, and the Allies, initially meant to encircle the Allies, had now found the victim of their own identical maneuver. Hitler and France have been approved of discouraging clear battles of Normandy, and the 2 armies of the German forces in Normandy has escaped throughout a single polish of an armored division. Outnumbered, the Poles have been pushed and failed for the stop full containment of a German encirclement. The German abandoned most of their heavy equipment, and a decisive moment, no longer any question of the Allied superiority, northern France and Normandy had been fallen, lay road of Paris open. The Operation Overlord is not completely overshadowed with another massive battle in the western front of the South France, also known as Operation Dragon. This had originally been the meant of Operation Overlord, Both topics were discussed on the Terence Conference of 1943, attended by the Allied leaders Churchill, Stalin, and Roosevelt. Stalin had the audacity to have these plans of Churchill, the landing of southern France that could be invaded Italy. By the Soviet forces began the communist monopoly of the Eastern Europe. Unfortunately, the decision that Roosevelt agreed on is Stalin moving from north to south, supporting the overlord, and Greenland Dragon has been shoved off of the concerns. However, the plan has been resisted. Of the ratified, storms destroyed the beaches, sabotaged airports, and created mass backlog on Allied shipping. As a result, the capture of such these ports of mercenaries have been primal. They had the crisis of the North, although Churchill remained vulnerable of the opposition of General Charles de Gaulle. He threw himself behind the operation lines of a large-scale Ocean invasion involving 500,000 men, later called the Free French Forces, contrasted by the German forces occupying the southern France of just 11 divisions. Under the Army Group G, the beaches were chosen. A night of the invasion, the southern branch of the French resistance had begun a large-scale sabotage, counter-warfare, unlike the scattered, and during the early days they planted Operation C4 in 1944, now operating in primarily a force to be reckoned with, the recognized of the French forces of the interior FFA, the commandos, that they have never been jammed of communication. They have acts of support, and the German units of 3 of them, the French commanders, have scattered out the artillery of the daunting 107 and 130mm high cliffs of the mainland known as Operation Remo. The raiders have been spotted by German machine guns. A major has successfully killing and captured thousands of enemy soldiers, only sustaining dozens of casualties himself. Primarily, the landings was a success. The German soldiers were joined into their bunkers of screams of Aryan sirens when they scrambled for gear and when the first bomb had dropped and shaken the ground. Shattered in the hardened concrete bunkers, there was no escape for thousands of bombers, clogged the skies, and their pilots of near-air superiority posed by the Allies' full naval bombardment, followed by the artillery shells of 14-inch diameter raining guns. They have the ceased to exist of transport, nearly landing zones of the few defenders, where they take advantage of the Pyrrhus Alpha, the Delta Belt, and the minimal resistance of the Camel Base. Stubbornly, and most of the heavily defended bases were shelled and bombed. Remaining that was successful, and the Allies have been retreated. They, the MG-42s, have been showering tens of thousands of casualties on D-Day. Ultimate Allied pay toll was 700 wounded, and the passage of the Mediterranean fleet, despite heavy resistance, was finally open on the morning